Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Ysabel. I work at the Hague Humanity Hub. And at the Hague Humanity Hub, we are a platform that brings together change makers that are working at the intersection of peace, justice, and humanitarian action. At the Hub, we strongly believe that creating physical and intellectual spaces for dialogue is essential to creating a more peaceful and just world. And we don't only provide a physical space for collaboration that I see Ali and Sajjad often around, but we also cultivate intellectual and emotional space for the conversations that matter. Conversations that are often difficult and sometimes dangerous, but always necessary. And I believe that today is one of those conversations. I feel very honored that Iran Academia, as a member of the Hub, has invited me to come and moderate this panel. I think this is a conversation that could not be more timely or more urgent. And obviously, I would like to acknowledge my position in it as well. As you can tell, I am not from Iran, and I do not know what it's like to live under a regime that polices not only what can be said, but also what can be remembered. I come from a European context where the rise of the far right and the erosion of trust in media, as well as the weaponization of the narrative, are increasingly present. In my home country, in Germany, we have seen cyber mobs aligned with far-right movements such as the Alternative für Deutschland Party coordinate online abuse of journalists, weaponize nostalgia, and flood social media with conspiracies, particularly during elections. This is not unique to Iran. The mechanisms of silencing, revisionism, and hyper-nationalist digital aggression are transnational. So while the political context differs vastly, the battlefield feels increasingly familiar. And today, we are here to explore how media becomes part of this front line. The title of this panel, Media as a Battlefield, is not a metaphor. For many people in the Iranian context, whether journalists, dissidents, or everyday users, media is quite literally a battleground. It's a place where identities are attacked, memories are erased, narratives rewritten, and voices are silenced. But it can also be a site of resistance, of remembrance, and of defiance. We are here to examine how media in the Iranian context is not just a means of communication, but a weapon, a shield, and a front line of resistance. Whether through cyber mobs targeting dissidents or through skewed conflict coverage that influences international perception, today's panelists will help us understand how media shapes and is shaped by power. We will navigate what is being fought over in the media arena, who is excluded, and how those inside and outside of Iran can resist narrative control. And we will hear from two people who sit at the intersection of those truths. One is sitting right here next to me, Behdad Bordbar. You are a former journalist at Radio Zaman and Al Monitor, and you studied Middle Eastern studies at the University of Oslo, where you're visiting us from today. And you will be examining the rise of far-right nationalism and the mobilization of cyber mobs to enforce ideological dominance. And yeah, I would like to give you a very warm welcome. Thank you for being here.
Initially, I presented a paper in English, and then yesterday everybody presented in Persian, and I thought, okay, that would make sense. The audience is from Iran, and I will talk in Persian. So I'm not so prepared. Probably I divided to two parts. I present the English text quickly, and then I will speak in Persian. And then we can have a discussion about the topic. Studies of the far-right movements in the West is concentrated on the situation that there is a liberal democracy and how far-right is damaging the liberal values and the institutions. But in case of Iran, they are not in verge of winning any elections, and the discussion is in another context, and I focus on the cyber mobs and how do they exist and how do they present themselves. So as you know, political power in Iran is limited to regime loyalists. And even though there are many right-wing political actors, I'm not including that. I'm talking about people who are opposition to the system, and they have been absorbed by the far-right movement, the international far-right movement, and especially election of President Donald Trump from 2016 has gave energy to this cyber movement. And yes, Arash had a presentation yesterday, and their existence is in the cyber spaces, not in the real political system. The Israeli military strike on Iran has intensified their rhetoric, feeding fantasies of regime collapse and monarchical restoration. So this group hopes that with the recent attacks, the next king of Iran, have an opportunity to return back to the power. Although they claim to support freedom and democracy, their discourse is exclusionary. My motivation to write this paper was when I read that three former political prisoners of the Shah regime in the United States brought a case against former head of Savak, Parviz Sabeti. He's still alive in the United States. And they have been tortured, and then they want to bring the case in the court in the United States. And then when I started reading the comments section of BBC Persian or the other media outlets that covered the news, that is three gentlemen at their 80s, they want to bring the case in a free trial in the United States. These mobs wrote hundreds of comments, and there was no sympathy with these people who had been tortured in the former regime. And it gave me the understanding that this group of people, even though they claim that they aspire for democracy and freedom, they don't have any sympathy for people who have been tortured, and they don't want to have free trial. So their target also includes intellectuals, feminists, Islamists, and also ethnic minorities. And they try to agitate and provoke, and they do acts that are not usual. One of there was one person in exile in France who urinated on the grave of Ghulam Hussein Saidi, who was a leftist writer, very well known, I mean, among the top 5 novelists of Iran. So urinating on the grave was one of the actions, and then this fight goes to cyberspace, and of course some people showed sympathy with him, and that is that is one of the things that I wanted to mention. So they have also hostility to ethnic minority rights and cultural pluralism. And usually they claim that any person who talks about minority rights is a separatist. And that gives the right to them to insult them. And also they promote a kind of homogenized national identity, which is Persian language, and without mention of any other cultural existences. And the contradiction here is very interesting, that even though they are, they know themselves as patriotics, but now, because they have this fantasy of freedom in the future, they are ready to support Israel and occupation of the country for this fantasy that they have. So I talked about yes, my motivation was to tell you about what happened in the BBC coverage of the news. And also some roots of this movement, the other presenters also discussed it. One of them is disappointment with the reform movement. We had a reform movement that started, I think, like 28 years ago, 24 years ago, with the Khatami, and then majority of people gave a chance to reforms, but the system was so rigid, and the reform was not actualized. And then the recent, the Islamic regime in Iran have been suppressing the opposition since the 1980, 1982, but the recent ones from 2017, 18, and the last one in 22, kind of like the regime has lost its legitimacy. And more people have been absorbed by this notion of we should fight the system. There is no more hope for reform, and we should topple the system. Let me go. Yes, and also I wanted to mention that two TV channels of Manoto and Iran International shaped the dominant exile discourse, narratives aligned with global right-wing populism and Trumpism. And they emphasize kind of nostalgia, anti-pluralism, and hostility to the left. So that comes in their slogans. In Persian, they say, مرگ بر سخائن چپی چی بودش ملا چپی مجاهد. Okay, so there's like a death to three groups. One of them is the mullah, or the priest, and the second is Mujahideen Khalq, which was a former leftist opposition, and then the socialists. Um, and also there is no, for example, sympathy with LGBTQ or other minorities. Liberal values applied selectively, dissenting voices marginalized in this movement. And then I wanted to, in the Persian section, I wanted to talk a little bit about dehumanization, what they have done. And Arash yesterday talked about it and said that its existence is in media. It doesn't have real power. But now I want to discuss how it is can be instrumental for the narratives. Israel has occupied Gaza, right? During the 18 months, they have killed more than 60,000 people. And this problem of dehumanization, and also there is no critique of Israel, slightly, a little bit here and there, but there was no sanctions, and they could create kind of a death world, as Achille Mbembe is an African philosopher. I wanted to use that notion to say that how this, kind of like a notion of bare life, that one person is living, but we don't know if tomorrow this person can live or cannot live. And the force that is killing is not responsible. Nobody is bringing them to the court and asking these soldiers or this person, say, why did you kill this baby? Why did you kill this old person? Okay, so that is happening also in Iran. And this far-right movement enables them. Like, I think the first day that there was a young woman who died, her surname was Abbasi, right? Parnia. Her name was Parnia Abbasi. She was a poet and 24 years old. One of the scientists that they assassinated, also the first day, also his surname is Abbasi. It's a very common surname in Iran. And Fereydun Abbasi was a scientist. Okay, he died, and then this girl with her family died. They're also Abbasi. And these mobs started to say that, oh, why do you, are sorry for her death? She is daughter of that Abbasi, which was not true, but it takes time to, to spread the truth, and they occupy the cyberspace and then somehow justify the death of this young person. Okay, how much time do I have?
You already done.
Really?
Yeah.
Also, okay.
So you can have 2 minutes to wrap it up and
Yeah. دوستان عزیز، من فکر میکردم که مثل دیروز منم میتونم به فارسی صحبت کنم. اول میخواستم در مورد نقش به اصطلاح این فعالان راست افراطی ایرانی که هواداری میکنن از سلطنت طلبی صحبت بکنم و اینکه چگونه خودشون رو پرزنت میکنن، چه فعالیت هایی در فضای مجازی دارن. اولا کاغذ پیپری که نوشته بودم تمرکزش روی کامنت هایی بودش که زمانی که 3 نفر از قربانیان شکنجه در زمان شاه تصمیم گرفتن که آقای پرویز ثابتی که از رؤسای ساواک رو بیارن به دادگاه در آمریکا، این افراد بسیار عصبانی شده بودن و به جای اینکه از حق یک فردی که شکنجه شده دفاع بکنن، این افراد رو به خیانت، به مزدوری و به هر چیز دیگری متهم می‌کردن و این خب نشان دهنده این بودش که هیچ احترامی برای مسئله حقوق بشر، مسئله آزادی بیان یا دادخواهی قائل نیستن. در ادامه یک اشاره کوتاهی کردم به موضوع انسانزدایی و اینکه حضور اینها در فضای مجازی خیلی الان میتونه کمک بکنه به اون روایتی که اسرائیل لازم داره برای کشتن شهروندان عادی. میدونید که یکی از دروغ‌هایی که اینها میگن، این اسرائیل میگه این هستش که ما هدفمند حمله میکنیم، فقط مثلا نظامیان رو میکشیم، ولی اینطور نیستش. همینطوری که در غزه، در فلسطین، در لبنان، در سوریه غیر نظامیان رو کشتن، در ایران هم این اتفاق خواهد افتاد. ولی این گروه به اصطلاح راست افراطی ایرانی در خدمت تبلیغات اسرائیلی، مثلا یک نمونه رو خانم پرنیان عباسی رو اشاره کردن که یک زن جوانی بودش که در روز اول کشته شد همراه با خانواده‌اش. این افراد رفتن در فضای مجازی نوشتن که این عباسی، خانم پرنیان عباسی، دختر فریدون عباسی، دانشمند هسته‌ای هستش که اتفاقا همون روز کشته شده بود، ولی این صحیح نبود. به هر حال این جنبش راست افراطی کمک میکنه به مسئله انسانزدایی. من پیش از این بخواستم به اشاره کنم به مسئله نظریه آگامبن و آشیل ممنبه، ولی ظاهرا وقتم کمه دیگه. درسته؟ خیلی یه احترام بذاریم به بحث کنم.
Thank you very much. Even though I did not understand the last part, I'm happy to hear later what was said. And thank you so much for your presentation. I would now like to give the floor, the online floor to Mazdak Azar. He holds a master's in journalism studies, human rights and democracy, and humanitarian action and conflict studies, which makes me think I need to get more master's degrees. In his presentation, he will explore the integrity of journalistic coverage during times of war and introduce a new framework, semi-war journalism, to help us understand the failures of objectivity, even in media outlets that claim to speak for the oppressed. Yes, I would like to now give you the floor, Mazdak.
Thank you. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, hello, everybody, and thanks for having me, and thanks to organizers. Well, I think I should be able to see my presentation. I do not see it right now. So, the slides, I mean. Yeah, great. So, the topic I'm going to talk about today is about media and their role in conflict coverage. And I'm going to to have an introduction to the terms and the approach, which is called peace journalism and war journalism. Next. Yeah, I mean, today, along with my presentation, I'm gonna show you an analysis of done upon BBC Persian, BBC Farsi, and Iran International as an example to show how media are functioning not only as those who are covering the coverage, but as those are acting as weapons in the battlefield. Next. Yeah, next. Okay, first of all, by conflict, if those colleagues are translating, please use the term niza for conflict. And today I'm going to talk about armed conflict, of course. And I would like to start with the definition Johan Galtung provided for the term conflict, a dynamic process involving a contradiction, attitudes, and behaviors which can manifest in various forms of direct, structural, and cultural violence. And as said, my presentation is on next slide is on armed conflicts, and I just hear that people have talked about the role of media, and as being listed in, I mean, academic literature, and also in by many medias, the role of media are to inform people, to entertain them, educate them, and serve the public. For instance, BBC has stated that the BBC's mission is to inform, educate, and entertain everyone, and our commercial mindset is driven by our public service values. And elsewhere mentioned, the mission of the BBC is to act in the public. So this is the basis of my presentation and why peace journalism is very important. Next. And again, media, as we all know, are considered the fourth state in a democracy, or the fourth pillar, as a force to rein the politicians' abuse of power, a venue to expose corruption and ensure the flow of information and inform those in power about the opinion of the public. Next. But on the other hand, what we do see in the reality, in practice, the media themselves act as a political player to influence the public's opinion. And also, in the times of conflict, the media mirror the government's perspective, which is not what it's supposed to be the role of media. Instead of reflecting the public's opinion, in the case of covering conflict, media are more giving special attention to conflict as a news value, something sexy to be covered, and a product to be sold and consumed better. Next. Now, how to assess media conflict coverage, how to measure it, how to conceptualize and operationalize the way media should function. Here I start the presentation about the two terms and the approaches, peace journalism versus war journalism, how to differentiate these two approaches in conflict coverage. What do I mean by peace journalism? Peace journalism is when editors and reporters make choices about what, and so naturally what not to report, and how to report it, how to frame it, which create opportunities for society at large to consider and to value non-violent developmental response to conflict and not to fuel it. Next. Journalists who follow the peace journalism approach cover conflict as a problem, not as a product, not as something sexy that needs to be solved, not to be re-escalate in their reporting. On the other hand, in war journalism, conflict is seen as a battle, and the battle as a sport arena and gladiator circus. And here I would like to request those who are translating, please, for the term peace journalism, you should be able to use the term in Farsi روزنامه‌نگاری صلحگرا، نه روزنامه‌نگاری درباره صلح. Or war journalism is not روزنامه‌نگاری درباره جنگ یا روزنامه‌نگاری جنگ، بلکه روزنامه‌نگاری جنگگرا، روزنامه‌نگاری که جنگ را حتی میتونه شروع بکنه، تقویت بکنه، به ادامهش کمک بکنه. So next. Here is how Johan Galtung categorized these two terms. On the one hand, we have peace and conflict-oriented journalism, which explore conflict information. How is it formed, and who are the parties, and what are the goals and the issues? And it is a win-win orientation. On the other hand, war journalism, which we see today very much, for instance, by Iran International covering the Iran-Israel conflict, they focus on conflict arena. It's only two parties, which is not true. It's only one goal, win, and it is a zero-sum orientation. It should be in peace journalism, it should be open space, open time. It goes beyond now and here, but to the history, to the context, to the roots and everything, the causes and outcomes everywhere. It gives voice to everybody. I mean, make conflicts transparent and sees the conflict as a problem and focus on conflict creativity. On the other hand, the war journalism is closed space. It's only here and now, and it neglects the roots, it neglects the causes, and only talks about who thrown the first stone, not the roots, not the context. Make wars opaque instead of transparent. It's us, them, otherness. It's propaganda. It gives only voice to us. For instance, Iran International is giving merely voice to the Israeli front. On the other hand, for peace journalism, it is about humanization of all sides, more so worse. The divorce, the weapons. War journalism dehumanize them, and importantly, war journalism is peace journalism is about violence war occurs, focus on invisible effects, not only how many people died, but the cultural, economic, everything, like effects of the war, the traumas, while the war journalism focuses only on visible effects. Next. Importantly, peace journalism is about telling the truth to the audience, right? Expose untruths on all sides, not only on our side. So war journalism expose their untruths, not us, not our untruths, not our lies. And last but not least, peace and conflict journalism is about focusing on suffering of all over, on women, aged, children, and giving voice to the voicelesses, and give name to all evildoers, not only the two leaders or like the top commanders, and focus on people peacemakers, not elite peacemakers, while war journalism focuses on our suffering, on and being their mouthpiece, give name all of their evildoers, like only Khamenei, or on the other side, Iranian state TV talks about only Benjamin Netanyahu. No, it's about all evildoers. Next. And well, peace journalism is about to provide some solution. Like, we need to talk about the resolutions, not only what is happening right now. So it talks about peace and non-violence ones, and creativity. It highlight peace initiatives, also to prevent more war, focus on the structure, culture, the peaceful society, aftermath, resolution, reconstruction, reconciliation, while war journalism, which we see today very much, is about victory and only ceasefire and conceal peace initiatives before victory is at hand, and focus on treaty institution, the controlled society living for another war, and return if the old flares up next. Well, this is like a normative framework I talked about, but how to actually operationalize it, this framework of peace journalism, and how to assess and evaluate media and journalistic products such as news articles, to see which, for instance, news article align with peace journalism, or on the other hand, war journalism. I'm going to talk shortly about a descriptive and measurement tool, and for example, I'm going to take the example of, as said, BBC Persian and Iran International. So here you see on the left hand side, you see war journalism frames, and for each item I just talked about based on Galtung categorization, we give a number to each element. For instance, war journalism is reactive, right? So we put an indicator like W1 and so on and so forth. On the other hand, for instance, if you look into the right hand P9, which is indicator number 9 for peace journalism, it's win-win orientation, right? So if we find a win-win orientation in conflict coverage in an article, so for the P9 we give a score, and if we find the elements of war journalism, we give a score to that very factor. Then we sum up, next slide, we sum up the total scores for war journalism and peace journalism in each article. Then we deduct them to see which one exceeds the other. If, for instance, next one, if for instance, you could look into the top left, which is war journalism. If we have 4 more war journalism than peace journalism, right, that's an article which aligns with war journalism approach. And if we have more peace journalism factors, then we have peace journalism. And here I do present shortly my own theory based on the Galtung theory, which is I proposed semi-war journalism, arguing that, well, this is a social phenomena. It's not binary, and there are things in between, just like justice and injustice. You cannot say here we have, in this border we have justice, and on the other side is injustice. So there is a gray area in between. So I presented the concept of semi-war journalism. If we have a very sharp difference between the two, war journalism and peace journalism, I mean the total scores, the final scores, well, that's either war journalism or peace journalism. If the difference is not that much big and that not that much sharp, so we have semi-war journalism. So let's, next slide. Here, this is a pilot study, which I should say, if someone is concerned about generalizability of the findings, I have repeated the very same analysis upon 100 news articles by BBC Farsi and Iran International. So I did analyze their coverage on the 2022 war in Ukraine, and here I'm just presenting the analysis upon only 8 from each news outlet, Iran International and BBC Persian. Next. So as said, I have analyzed each article, like I1 means Iran International article number 1 and so forth. And total war journalism scores for the article 1 is 7. So we have 7 factors or framings of war journalism, while only 1 peace journalism. So if you deduct them, it's 6. So it's a sharp war journalism, and so on. So you see, we have war journalism, and one semi war journalism, and surprisingly, no single peace journalism in Iran international conflict coverage on the war in Ukraine. Next. While on the other hand, BBC Persian, you have two war journalism, one peace journalism, and three semi-war journalism. Next. So here, if you want to see the result on the diagram, you see the red ones are Iran International. You see Iran International is mainly on the side of war journalism, with only one semi-war journalism, which that one is very close to war journalism, while BBC Persian has one peace journalism and three in between, which means BBC Persian has been more successful in covering correctly the conflict in Ukraine. Yet still they should work on their way of conflict coverage, because they have only one piece journalism, which means this one piece journalism article, which means they have been able to see like the context, to see both sides. They have not only relied on elite sources but people. They have most probably talked about some type of resolution of the conflict, and so on and so forth, as I explained in the categorization. Next slide. So you might think, I mean, the dear moderator in the introduction talked about like Farsi language media, which is of concern these days. And I need to add that this is not only, unfortunately, about Farsi language media. Well, CNN is the mother of modern war journalism, which means CNN, for instance, on the war on Gulf War, and on the war on Iraq, they acted like weapons, auxiliary arms to NATO. So this is unfortunately a global phenomena which should be worked upon. And these days, there are a lot of people, like not only in academia, but editors around the globe. They're working on their, I mean, at least some are very angry with people like me, why we call their product war journalism. But some people are working on their media and journalistic products. And there has been a shift away from war journalism to peace journalism, and as you could see in the finding of my pilot study, that applies to BBC products. So Galtung, which is the one who presented the idea and the approach and categorization of peace journalism, state that he compared like more than thousands of articles and assert that war journalism is dominant in the media. There are some other medias that are moving toward usage of peace journalism frames, and are among some of the media there is a shift away from some aspect of war journalism. They are still using many frames of war journalism in their reporting, but at least, for instance, regarding the using only elites as the source of news, they are making a shift to using people as source of the news as well. Next. So as a result, instead of being the media being the fourth state of democracy, like there are thousands of studies analyze the media products, journalistic news article, which shows that they are unfortunately acting as the fifth column of the army, not fourth state in democracy. They are not serving public. They are serving elites. They are serving armies. They are serving NATO. They are serving Israeli government. They are serving Iranian regime government. And that should be worked upon. That should be modified. That should be changed. Next. And in the case of, for instance, the case of Kosovo war, CNN followed NATO's lead. You know, it acted like the PR of NATO. And as a de facto public information partner, to NATO. In a BBC report, she, if I'm pronouncing correctly, NATO spokesperson compared the bombings with the son of angels. So it seems that like BBC reported was like glamorizing the bombings. And the media has elsewhere been described as weapons. So here the title allocated to this panel is media as battlefield, but media is not only battlefield. They are weapons. Battlefield is our minds. Battlefield are the minds of the audience. The media has elsewhere been described as weapons targeting the mind of the audience, and these minds are depicted as battlefield, or other considered media as key weapons in a conflict situation or any war, or some argue the media themselves are an element of conflicts, a key player in the conflict. Next. Which is thanking you to listening to my presentation. I would like to give more time to Q&A instead of me talking more on details. This was an attempt to give an in-depth categorization on what is going on by media coverage of the conflicts. And I wanted to give you a measurement tool how you could analyze the media articles and journalistic works to see whether they are fueling the wars or they're acting to at least do something better, or even they could be maybe able to provide some type of resolution or give more context, or generally saying, are they serving the public while they're covering the conflict, or they are serving the military commanders, the governments, and the elites, as I just mentioned. And a lot of the studies shows, unfortunately, media are chiefly serving the elites, not people. They're fueling the wars. They're acting as weapons. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a very insightful presentation. And as already was mentioned, I would like to now open the floor for any questions or reflections. I see there are already many. I would like to say to both of our panelists, of course, I would like to make sure that you know, even though I don't speak any Persian, feel free to ask in Persian. I'm sure someone will explain the question that was held later to me. And yeah, we can start over here, perhaps. I see there's a mic going.
Can I say a word?
Yeah, of course, please.
About Galtung? In 2010, I interviewed him, and it is still in the old website of Radio Zamane. If somebody's interested, yeah. I talked to him.
Thank you for sharing. Don't forget to check that out. And yeah, please go ahead with the questions.
So, I have a question about the peace journalism. There's a lot of conversations around, sitting top to down, looking at the media and deciding they've done it right or wrong. But what we don't talk about is access. The fact that the journalists are not allowed to get into, for example, Iran, people talking about the situation in Iran, the narrative that is different from what the government is saying, can become quite, it can become a security risk for people. So how do you factor in that kind of access restriction into your analysis?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. Well, maybe I could answer to your question by pointing to BBC Persian, which, as you know, you have worked there. Like, they do not have access to people, or at least they couldn't be in the field directly. But recently, I saw a report on the war in Ukraine by Siavash Ardalan. It was a kind of perfect one. He has no access. He was not in Ukraine, neither in Russia. He was sitting most probably in London in BBC office. The question is not about being there the question is to be able to give voice to different people, to different narratives, to different voice, to different approaches. The question is about not only talk about here and now, but present something about the context in which the conflict escalated and de-escalated, so the question of access to sources such as people is very important. But we have seen a lot of journalists who have been able, without being able to have direct access to people. I mean, here we talk about an approach, not not necessarily physical access to people, and we can talk about a lot of examples of journalistic works. They have no actually, they most probably sitting in headquarters, in offices, newsroom around the globe, and covering something on the other side of the globe, but they have been successful in doing peace journalism.
Thank you. Yes, I see there's quite a few more questions. Would you like to proceed over there? Yes, we'll make sure that you can all ask your questions.
ممنون. من با اجازه فارسی صحبت میکنم. میخواستم از مزدک بپرسم که اگه شاید بتونیم بگیم که مثلا رسانه تولید کننده گفتمان، در این حال گفتمان قالب جامعه هم میتونه تعیین کننده تولید محتوای رسانه‌ای باشه. اگه بتونیم اینو بگیم از منظر لکانی، پس سوال اینه که من میخوام بدونم اون پترن تکرار شونده ای که منجر به این شده که تو جنگ یا صلح رو در واقع در ژورنالیست تشخیص بدی چی بوده، و اینی که به نظرت آیا این از جامعه گرفته شده یا داره به جامعه داده میشه؟ یعنی آنچه که در این تحقیق مورد نظر تو بوده چی بوده؟ مرسی.
Sorry, I'm going to
Should I-
quickly translate that for the moderator. Oh, Behdad, you're translating it.
Yeah.
You did? Perfect. Go ahead.
Should I respond in Farsi or English?
English if you can.
Oh, yeah, okay, sure. Well, there are two things should be differentiated in your question. First is the way journalists are covering the conflict, and the second one is why they are doing so. So your question is about why. My presentation about how. The way they are covering the conflict is in a way they are fueling the conflict. But your question is why? What is the source of doing so? So you talked about the interaction between society and so many different things. So here we have to talk about the power dynamics, and most importantly, who owns the media? First of all, this is not the terms and approaches I presented. This is presented by Johan Galtung, and so many people have been using it. So many media have started to instruct their journalists about these terms and these approaches. And well, the question is who owns the media and for what interest, for whose interest media is functioning. If today there are many even academics talking about media even generate wars because there are money in wars. Media are owned by elites, given the very fact that we now live in the era of neoliberal policies. So governments are cutting the budgets on public service. So we seeing more and more private oriented, capital media outlets. So who are they serving? I would say my short answer to that could be the subject of a study. My answer would be they're serving the investors. If there are money in selling weapons, why not Iran International fuel the war? That's the question they should answer. Why they're doing so? Why they're acting like a PR of NATO army in the case of Ukraine, war in Ukraine, or the PR of Israeli government in the case of the very armed conflict we're witnessing today between the two regimes, oppressive regimes of Israel and Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you very much. I think this was a very insightful answer. Of course, protecting the stakeholders' interest unfortunately affects every industry. Let's see, we had some more questions over here, or maybe they were already answered partially.
Yeah, partially, yeah. It was more about the criteria, the defining criteria of war versus peace journalism. What are the precise criteria? How do you do the scoring job? If you can do that.
Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, sure. I think, I mean, if we could go back to the slides, I mean, well, that's some practical like question. Well, you have an, as said, you have a news article, for instance, then people use different methods. For instance, critical discourse analysis, for instance, I use. So you start reading the article, you have these quote lists, and then you have like factors or frames for war journalism. If they are present in the text, then you give a score to one for war journalism. War journalism number one, for instance, if you find it in instances, you find it in the article. If war two present, then you give two scores, three scores, and so on and so forth. The very same, if in the very same article, in an individual article, if you find like they're giving voice to both sides, right? So you give a score to peace, a score to peace journalism factors. If they're talking about some kind of context in which the conflict is being generated or regenerated, then yes, thank you. This is a peace journalism factor. You give another score. Then you sum up both sides war journalism scores in one individual articles and peace journalism scores, and that you deduct the two numbers. If one exceeds the others, for instance, peace journalism factors total scores exceeds the war journalism ones, then that's a peace journalism article. You know, we can talk about more details, but I think we do not have that much time for that. Well, there are a lot of articles, I mean, a lot of literature. You could just simply search for peace journalism, war journalism, and how to operationalize it, how to assess it, how to do the analysis. And there are lots of them. You could study that.
Thank you so much. I'm sure there will be an opportunity to connect further on this later and delve deeper into the topic, because it is definitely very interesting. I see that we have some more questions. Just, yeah.
I have to just ask Mazdak Aziz, Mazdak John, why you didn't even mention Al Jazeera? Why you didn't even study this part of, I mean, he's gone, I think, or?
No, I'm here.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I want your own opinion about it. How you did study
Yeah, well,
these kind of things.
Well, I think I have already answered that. I said, unfortunately, what you see here done by Iran International and partially BBC Persian is not only about Farsi language media. Al Jazeera the same, like CNN the same. Well, I don't know. That's why I said mainstream media. If you analyze their work, their their job accord with, unfortunately, war violence journalism. And if you want my personal opinion about Al Jazeera, so I should say we do not have only one Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera English, you find something. Al Jazeera Arabic, you find something else. So they're doing different jobs in different languages, and that they do it deliberately, I would argue. So we could talk about, and these by the way, these media, they have been analyzed by so many different type of literature. You could find what Al Jazeera has done regarding various conflicts, what BBC has done, what other media has done. So your question, not only by me, but already answered by so many studies.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just quickly, we have one more question there, and then maybe one more over here. considering that we are running a bit short on time. And then I have one quick question that I would like to sneak in at the end, but let's continue over here.
Quick, and I have an engagement with Mazdak's work. First of all, thank you very much for bringing that part to our attention, the distinction between journalism, war journalism, and peace journalism. And I wanted to push that research. Perhaps it's not directly related to the data that you present, but I was thinking of perhaps I can push that towards two extreme limits and ask you about your reflections on these two limits. One of them is your thoughts on the approach of these two modes of journalism to future, in the sense that we hear quite often from both kinds of these journalisms that they list the possible outcomes of a conflict, whether peace-oriented or war-oriented. We hear these lists, and then we almost on a daily basis, especially these days, after the Israeli attack, we hear that more often, and everyone's speculating about the future. And I was wondering, how does that reflect in these two different kinds of journalism? Obviously, they do have different agenda. They do have different objectives to present the outcome of the war. Is there any difference there? Do they have anything sensible even to say about the future and the outcome of the war? It's
What do you mean by they? Sorry, I really don't get the core.
So suppose that the media that are more inclined towards war journalism versus the media that are more inclined towards peace journalism. How do they? What are their takes on the outcomes of the war, and how do they imagine the outcomes of the war? So this is one extreme case. Okay, if that makes any sense, I don't really expect answer. It's more of a point of reflection. And the second extreme of this engagement is just how do social media complicate this war versus peace? Because as you said, these two modes of journalism are quite institutionalized. They're owned by institutions, but then social media, a completely different thing. And do we see a different thing? Does this research offer any perspective on social media journalism, if that's the term? Thank you. Sorry for making this too long.
Yeah, I start with your second question. Yes, what I talked about is not only about news, like mainstream media. It could be applied to social media, even citizens. So not only institutional accounts of mainstream medias on social media, but also like citizens who are dealing. So the approach could be applied to every and each like content being used about a conflict, like even if a citizen is doing that. So you could analyze those texts. And the situation is being became more complicated by the growth of social media. But I would argue that even social media is generally, the narratives. Some might say that, well, people are now allowed, they are free to express themselves on social media. But I would argue the contrary, which is like you see people being presented to the society by being a presenter at a news media outlet. For instance, if you're a presenter at BBC Persian, then you have millions of followers. So you're the one who influence the minds of more audience, and you're the one who's shaping the narratives because you are a famous one, you famous person, So I would say that social media are generally and in average are negatively affected and impacted by mainstream media, not only because of mainstream media's institutional accounts, but because like Puria Zeraati, who knew Puria Zeraati? Who is this guy? Who should give a damn to this guy? Why we know him now? Because he was a presenter at Manitou, and he is a presenter now, or so-called journalist. He is not a journalist, but a presenter at Iran International. That's why he has millions of followers. So social media, in short, is being dominated by the narratives being disseminated, unfortunately, by mainstream media. And regarding your first question, I think partially that been covered, because those following the peace journalism, peace and conflict, that's the correct name, peace and conflict journalism, because peace journalism meaning that you see the conflict, you see the context, you see the roots, you see the routine, the resolutions and everything. So people doing peace journalism So how do they see the outcomes? That's a part of their job. The outcome for them is win-win. The outcome is a structural peace, not only ceasefire. The outcome for them is to see people, what happened to people, normal people. The outcome for them is to seek a not temporary ceasefire, as said, but also a long-term resolution, not negative peace, but positive peace. They're seeking even for structural violence, like cultural violence and things like that. And I hope I have answered your questions.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the lady over there a chance to ask a last question, and then we will start wrapping it up. And yeah, please, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of the you. I would like to speak in Persian.
Of course.
اگر که تو از 30 سال به بعد مهاجرت کنی 3-4 تا زبان صحبت میکنی ولی هیچ کدومشو خوب صحبت نمیکنی. این ویژگیه که من دارم. مزدک عزیز، خیلی خیلی از متنت متشکرم. من فکر میکنم برای اینکه ما شرایط و ارائه رو که داشتی بهتر بتونیم لمس کنیم، شاید خوب باشه یه قدم برداریم به گذشته. دموکراسی مدیریتی بود که یک قول رو میداد، میگفت اون چیزی رو که الان تو کشورهای پیرامونی هست، از جمله ایران و سخنگوی قبلی هم رو اون بحث داشت، که مبارزه طبقاتی، مبارزات اجتماعی رو ببریم توی حاکمیت، توی یک دموکراتیس فرم و توی اونجا مبارزه طبقاتی و غیره صورت میگیره. یا به قولی لاتر بعدهاش مسئله اینترسکشنالیتی اومد که به عنوان یک اینسترومنتاریوم بود تا تمام مبارزات اجتماعی رو بدنیت بده. اینا میره توی حاکمیت و مدیا یا رسانه ها نقششون اینه که اینها رو به پوبلیک ارائه بدن، به جامعه ارائه بدن با کومنتار، که تو این پروسه مسئله این که آیا این مبارزات حقیقتاً در حاکمیت صورت میگیرن و آیا اینها یه مبارزه واقعی هستن، همه اینا رو آینه بده به جامعه. چیزی که الان اتفاق افتاده، یعنی الان 40 سال اخیر به دلیل مسئله نئولیبرالیسم، حاکمیت ها دیگه مدافع منافع اجتماعی جوامع نیستن، بلکه بچه انیاخر چیه په فارسی؟ نداریم این واژه رو، نه؟ الان در واقع زنده باد آتش‌بیار معرکه الان برای مارکت اوفرهایت ها هستن، حاکمیت ها هستن. حاکمیت ها الان منافع شرکت ها رو 40 ساله حمایت میکنن و نمایندگی میکنن و نه رسانه ها و مبارزه طبقاتی که باید از طریق حکومت صورت بگیره. به این دلیله که ما میبینیم که این رسانه ها هم تخصصی میشن و کی برای جنگ میپردازه؟ تمام این میلیتری کمپلکس ایندوستری و نه صلح هیچ جای سرمایه گذاری نداره. صلح چیزیه که مردم میخوان. از این زاویه ما باید رسانه ها رو به اینجا برسونیم که جنگ رو کریمینالیزه بکنن و نشون بدن که صلح یک خواسته اجتماعی جمعیه، یک خواسته دموکراتیکه. تو رابطه با جنگ هرگز مردم انتخاب نمیکنن، حاکمیتات بین خودشون انتخاب میکنن، در حالی که تو رابطه با صلح یک نوای اجتماعیه. و ما الان باید روی این مسئله تاکید کنیم، چون جنگ جهانی سوم الان تو 3 منطقه اکتوئله. مرسی.
Yes, thank you very much. I understood some of the words. I got some help translating. I would love to hear later what was said. It sounded like it was spoken from the heart and very passionately. So thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, for now, we will have to wrap it up here. But I'm sure you will stay around maybe for a conversation or some questions. And yeah, online, I'm sure there will be some connection points highlighted as well, how you can get in touch. I would like to thank both of you very much for your clarity and for your urgency as well. And it was incredible to learn more about the current media landscape in Iran. But as I said in the beginning, this is not just about Iran. It is about all the shifting terrain of media and how stories can protect, harm, or erase communities. And thank you all again to the audience for participating, for showing so much passion. And I hope this is not the end of the conversation, but another step deeper into it. And on behalf of the Humanity Hub and Iran Academia, thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.